Well, hey,
Yeah, I
everybody,
said,
welcome back. We are on episode number 21 of the Dan Time podcast. And this is your Christmas episode. It'll be coming out Christmas Eve. And I really couldn't think of a better guest for this occasion. I'm so happy we could line this up. Um, this Today's guest is from episode 8, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm not looking at the catalog right now, but Dan Kobylka. I'm very happy to be pronouncing his name correctly today. Um, if you haven't heard the first episode, I would recommend um, jumping off of this one. Go back and listen to episode 1 or part 1 with Dan, and then come back to this one, and you'll get the full background. Dan Kobylka launched the Challenger baseball program for special needs individuals in Chatham-Kent, Ontario, Canada, over 30 years ago, and it just has a remarkable life story and impact in his community. I really don't know that you could quantify it. What he's been able to do with, his. Some people get a new lease on life one time around. He's actually had. I mean, we may kind of rehash the story a little bit here, but uh, Dan's had 2 heart transplants and a brain tumor removed, and has just made it his life's work to impact other people, and particularly those on the margins, as you might say. But um, so I'm just thrilled to have Dan here. We're going to talk a little bit about the spirit of Christmas, it being the on the eve of Christmas here, and we're going to have some fun as well at the end of the episode. I guess it was the part that we had stopped recording. Dan and I got to talking about fantasy football, and I had no idea. So it was then where I said, Dan, we have to do,
yeah,
we got to do a follow up episode where we do a little fantasy football talk, and he's also got some research for me that we'll get into. A good trivia question for you guys to see if you can rack your brains, a football related trivia question without any, you know me, I can talk another few minutes. So I'm going to pump the brakes and introduce and welcome back Dan Kobylka. Thanks for being here, Dan.
thank you very much. Just want to show your listener, your viewers, my shirt. Um, as Dan said, I've had a bit of a medical history, and I've had 2 heart transplants, and I've been living with a donated heart for 35 years now. And 3 years ago, I had to have a brain tumor removed. And the next time I went up to London to get my checkup, they said, Dan, you're a cockroach. We just can't kill you. They said, when nuclear war happens, it's you and the cockroaches get to repopulate the earth. And I said, it's worth a shirt. Because people get shirts and they say the beat goes on, or same body rebuilt motor. And I thought this was a better symbol of my journey, was I'm the cockroach. They just can't get rid of me. So,
One thing I
but
didn't ask
anyway,
last,
go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I had my first transplant in 1989 and my second one in 2000. Now, because Christmas is coming up, I have a Christmas story for you. Christmas of 1981, I was 26, and I was taken from my hometown here in Chatham up to London, Ontario, where they have a coronary care unit. And they checked me over, and I knew I was really, really sick. In fact, they told my parents that I might not make the night, and they told me I was in grave condition. But over the public and the speakers in the coronary care unit, they were playing Christmas carols. And to this day, whenever I hear Anne Murray singing Silent Night, it just reminds me I'm still alive. And that's what those Christmas carols mean to me. And I'm a sucker.
That's a great memory.
Yeah.
And with it being Christmas Eve, do you always go back to that occasion? I'm sure it's not always pleasant to think of that night. Was that? Let me just ask you, that day
Yeah.
in 1981, were you feeling okay during the day, and then
Oh no, I've been getting sick for quite some time. I was
okay,
I was in congestive heart failure. As a way of explaining it to your viewers, imagine you start blowing air into a balloon, and the balloon gets bigger, and as it gets bigger, it gets weaker, so it can't take the pressure, so it gets bigger and weaker. And once that process starts, there's not a whole lot they can do for it. And My only option was a transplant. So that's the Reader's Digest version of congestive heart failure. Because pretty soon your body just cannot uh, function well enough to stay alive. And the worst thing is your kidneys kind of shut down and you start taking on fluid. And that I think was the worst part and one thing they had to do. But I'm still here 35 years later, so we'll take it.
Another thing that we touched on and we really didn't explore
Mhm.
on the first episode was your nursing home ministry.
Sure.
And are you still involved there?
I am as involved as COVID will let me.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some nursing homes here that are still down. I go in, I have to wear a mask in one nursing home. It's tiring to wear that mask, but that's a mission, so you do it. And I've been doing Christmas or nursing home ministry now for over 10 years. So, and I just want to mention, if I kind of stop talking, it's because the brain injury, sometimes words just don't come and I have to fish around in my brain for another word. So that's what happens if I pause and it just doesn't seem to make sense. And last week I was talking to someone from my church and I wanted to say, that's a beautiful nativity scene. I couldn't come up with the nativity scene. So I used the word creche and they had no idea what that was. So if I stutter a little bit, that's why.
Well, that's quite all right with me and with my viewers as well, I'm sure.
Okay.
Another quote that I made a note of from the first episode, this just kind of speaks to the cards that you're dealt in life.
Mhm.
Make it work.
Yes.
Remember, you shared a quick anecdote on that. Make it work.
Yeah.
Most everybody has some situation going on. It may appear sometimes as we're passing through our days and we're at the grocery store and we're in public and well, look at that guy. He looks, like he's got everything going on. Look at that lady getting out of that nice car and they don't look like they have problems. Everybody's got some
Oh,
situation. Um, but you've really had to make it work for what, almost 40 years or over
yeah.
40 years.
Yeah.
Are there some days where you get a little down sometimes
Oh,
and you have to draw on some
I won't lie.
reserves or Mhm.
I get up some mornings and I look at all those medications and it reminds me that I'm mortal. And sometimes
Yeah.
I don't even want to look at them. And you go through periods. And almost everyone, or almost everyone who has a heart transplant goes through severe depression. Sooner or later, it's going to happen. And when I'm contacted by other recipients for advice, one of the things I say is your social worker is being paid, use her or him. So, and yeah, those days happen.
Yeah. Um, what then we kind of talked a little bit about sports and
Mhm.
some baseball talk and
Mhm.
football. Is that something that you get excited about just being a fan and especially with um, fantasy sports? People on the outside kind of think it's a joke. It's something that grown men do that is maybe more designed for a 10-year-old, but it really is something to sink your teeth into and have some fun with, and the drafting and the free
Yeah.
agents. And ha- let me just ask, how are you doing this year?
You know what? You win some, you lose some. That's just fantasy sports. And you don't like to complain, but in one of my leagues, my three quarterbacks were Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and Kirk Cousins. So,
Hey, for those of you who don't keep up all the time, those are pretty top tier quarterbacks who all have just so happened to sustain injuries in the regular
yeah.
season.
And then uh, during that nightmare that happened a few weeks ago, my opponent had Devontae Adams when Las Vegas beat the Los Angeles Chargers. And it's kind of a bad way to lose. And you say the other guy's team just gave up. And basically, the Chargers just gave up that night. And so he made some hay on that one. And those are things you can't control. So you just don't get upset about it. Um, I was thinking about people who pay to play. And my suggestion is just I'll give you my email address and you can send me the money because
Hmm.
you have no control over what happens.
Yeah, yeah. Fantasy sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, it's kind of a crapshoot. I mean,
Mm,
I look at our standings, our league standings. We've had some of the same guys for And well, we've moved in a couple new players, but for we've been going about 15 years. And you'll look at like I'm in last place this year, and I've been playing since 2005.
Yeah.
And then I look at some guys that are in third and fourth place, and I remember the draft because we do a live draft, and
Okay.
they
Yeah.
made some ridiculous picks and odd rounds. They drafted a kicker in the fifth, stuff like that. And here they are, locking up the number three seed in the
Sure.
playoffs. And it just things happen, but it's part of the fun, I think. I
Well, I
I, I
call people.
started out 0-4 with I think I had Saquon Barkley hurt.
Oh yeah.
I had my top running back and top receiver, Cooper Cup. I believe they were both injured to start the year.
Yes. Um, it- the guys who draft the kicker in the fifth round, we call them guys who didn't show up for the draft. You know what I mean? That's how they got a kicker. They just didn't show up for the draft and they got who they got.
Yeah,
But I've also learned you can really build your team throughout the year if you're smart and you know how to use. Like I picked up, and you know the names Kyron Williams and Rashad White off the
right.
waiver wire, and so you got to keep your eye out for those guys. So,
Have you been playing with the same group of people, um, or do you have different leagues that you get into?
well, I get in different leagues because of different settings, but I have one
Hmm.
league I've been in for over 20 years, and kind of like the baseball program I ran. After a while, it's not about fantasy football; it's about the guys, the relationships.
Yeah,
And I've been to Atlanta to visit a couple of friends from the from our league, and they've been up here, and that was a real bonus was getting to know those guys. And I wrote down a little note for fantasies, especially the Yahoo folks. Don't ever post on the message board when you're drunk, stoned, or angry. And if you notice the message boards this year, if you're drunk, stoned, or angry, you can't find the message board. So
yeah. We have a few players that take it a little seriously, and I mean, after the fact, they say, "Oh well, I was just kidding around," but it's like, well, it sure seemed like uh, you were pretty worked up over that. But
yeah,
we have a traveling trophy. It's a shadow box trophy that the winner's
okay,
name is engraved in it every year. So we just play for that. There's
yeah,
no money at stake,
yeah,
and and we have fun with it. But it's competitive. I would sure like to be doing a lot better than I did this year with 10 losses. I'm in the consolation bracket. So we actually, when you get into the consolation bracket, really all of our managers are still active because
that
you
helps.
don't want to finish last. Now you're
Mm-hmm.
fighting to not finish last because we have used to have a loser's trophy.
Okay,
Um, we kind of
now
done
if you
away with that, and now it's just a designation that
yeah. Now if you finish last, you get first pick next year.
I wish it worked that way.
That's how we do it. That's how we do it. And I play in a keeper league, and I play interesting format. It's a team league. So my team this weekend is the Lions. So I'll have all the Lions. That's my team, and the opponent, whoever he has, that's his team. So you're just playing team against team, and it's really a cool format. But you quickly learn um, passing touchdowns that were 12 in a team league, but running touchdowns that were 6. So you kind of go for the quarterback that's going to throw the most touchdowns. But that's a matter of the first rule of fantasy sports is learn the rules of your league.
Right.
That's the most important thing is know your settings.
Dan, when I was a teenager, I guess I was maybe 14 or 15, and rotisserie baseball, that was, I guess, what
Yeah.
started all of this. And I found out about a rotisserie baseball league in the back of a magazine. This was probably the early 90s or
Yeah.
mid 90s.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun to conduct business that way in a league where there was a voicemail box where you could put in your waiver
Okay.
request.
All right.
You got a packet in the mail every week or two with the updated standings. It was all paper and
Oh yeah.
mail,
Yeah.
and there was a salary cap, and it was so exciting. I played a couple years in my teenage years until you start driving and
Yeah.
your interest move around a little bit. But did you have a league?
Are you saying your interest turned to girls?
Yeah. it
One of our players,
from
one league, he's 16 years old. He's on a cruise. He's changing his lineup while he's on a cruise. He's 16. I said, you should be out looking at the girls. Come on. My
uh,
first baseball league was like your magazine. It was the back of a newspaper, London Free Press, and you picked your team. But once you mail it in, that's your team. You can't make changes. And there was like 80,000 people. And one week I was in first place out of 80,000 people. And then Benito Santiago broke his arm.
what a great catcher.
Oh yeah.
I just, Dan, I love sports talk in general with people who've been around a while because a name will pop out like that. Benito Santiago. I had his baseball cards. I still remember his throws to second, and he's a great defensive catcher and pretty decent offensively too. I
Yep.
want to say he at least a one or two time All Star.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, in our
are,
league, one of my leagues, we call it the Dr. John Award. That's when you bench some guy who scores 4 touchdowns, and you say, "I was in the wrong place at the right time." So if you now you have to self-report those awards.
yeah,
A few weeks ago, was it O'Donnell for Las Vegas with 4 touchdowns? I guarantee you nobody started him. So they get the award for being in the wrong place at the right time.
what about as far as just the NFL, the playoff picture? Do you have a team? Are you a Lions fan? Are you
I'm a Lions fan. I'm a Lions
mhm.
fan.
What players are you following? Do you have guys that you root for
I'm really beginning
just
to like
outside of?
Sam Laporta,
Hmm.
tight end for the Lions, rookie. Really impressed. And Jamar Gibbs. And if the Detroit Lions coaches are listening, they always do poorly against running quarterbacks. So they'll get as far as Philly, and then Jamal or Hurts will kill them. So I don't think this is their year. Baltimore looks solid. San Francisco, I think, has probably got to be the favorite. They're the most solid team. They have no weaknesses.
Yeah, the Baltimore Ravens. That's my favorite football team
All right.
in the NFL. Um, this year is kind of unique, where my best friend, he's been on the podcast, Jim Powell,
Mm.
is a
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland Browns fan, and
Oh, good Lord.
for whatever reason, maybe because I've been talking about the guy, he's had to hear me talk about him for over 10 or 12 years, Joe Flacco. Uh, he can't, he just doesn't like Flacco, and I can't pin him down to give me a good answer why. And
Okay.
when Flacco got, invited to the practice squad and found himself starting against the Rams, Jim just didn't know. He just had no explanation, and I kept asking him, "Hey, listen, we got to watch some games now. This is my
Sure.
favorite player on your
All
favorite
right.
team," and
Mm-hmm.
he's still not comfortable with it. But I got to say personally, I love what Joe's out there doing. He's showing people there's 32 teams, and 31 of them didn't have a place for him, and now
Mm-hmm.
they actually tried to make a play for him a couple weeks ago or last week when he was back on the practice squad
Sure.
procedurally.
Yeah. Well, if there's one guy I like to watch from the current NFL, it would be Deebo Samuel,
Yeah,
because he does everything and does everything really well. He blocks. They can run him out of the wildcat, and he catches well, and he can pass if he has to. So I just enjoy watching him play.
he played
Oh, oh,
at
oh,
Alabama.
okay.
Mm,
Although my all-time favorite to watch is Barry Sanders, because when
yeah.
he got the ball, you just didn't know what was going to happen, but it was going to be good. So he's someone I'd pay to watch play. So
Well, you had a trivia question for me,
all
and
right,
I'll let you ask it for the listeners because
all right. There is a Hall of Fame Super Bowl winning coach, and his grandparents are from my county, Chatham-Kent, and his grandfather was a minister at Union Baptist, and his father is Canadian by birth. His mother isn't, and he's in the Hall of Fame. And there's the question, because we not a lot of people around here, you know this fact. And for your listeners, it's Tony Dungy. His grandfather was Albert Dungy, and he was the head pastor at a Union Baptist Church in Dresden. This is not very far from here. So, great little trivia question. And I have
Yeah,
another one for you. I know
okay,
you
yeah,
want to
go
talk about
ahead.
the Underground Railroad, so here we go.
Yeah.
Famous. He's a good actor, not a great actor. Probably the most famous person in the world. And his great grandparents came to Canada for the Underground Road, and they settled in Nova Scotia, a little they call Africaville. And one of their great descendants was a professional wrestler, and his name is Rocky Johnson. So you know who Rocky Johnson's son is?
Um, hmm.
The Rock,
I
Dwayne
was about to
Johnson.
say Johnson, and I was thinking, is he old enough? Dwayne Johnson?
Yeah, yeah. He's from Nova Scotia, or his parents are from Nova Scotia. You know, and they crossed the border right after the American Revolution to get away from the slavery.
Well, I enjoyed doing some research on Marianne Shadd,
Yes.
and understand she's got a bronze statue
Mhm.
that they unveiled a few years ago in Buxton. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Just the distinction of, well, I guess it was her father that brought the family, and it's just a lot of kids. She's the oldest of
Mm-hmm.
13,
Mm-hmm.
um, to Southern Ontario after the Fugitive Slave Act was passed in
Mm-hmm.
1850. And it's always remarkable when I'm reading about historical figures, especially African Americans back then, who, um, were able to enter politics or enter these professions where if they had just been in Tennessee or Alabama, um, you know, or North Carolina, there'd just
Yeah.
be no chance for them to have a life like this. And you know that there were plenty of creatives and intellectuals in the Deep South, and it just saddens me to know that they were there and they just didn't have the opportunity. But getting back to Marianne Shadd, she was the first black woman publisher in all of North America. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
And I don't recall her brother's name, but this really surprised me. Um, he actually is he one of her brothers moved down to Mississippi
Mm-hmm.
and became was elected to the state house, I think, and then um, served as Speaker of the House,
Mm-hmm.
Mississippi, in the 1870s, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and then the publication, um, um, you could call it the name of the publication that she founded,
Not right now.
Provincial Freeman.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Or
I just so enjoy learning about these figures. It takes me back to, I think it was third grade.
mm-hmm.
I did a report on Harriet Tubman,
Okay.
and but yeah, so Marianne Shadd and her family, they were responsible. I mean, who knows how many fugitive slaves they were able to um, help bring to freedom through the Underground Railroad.
Actually, she started a school in Buxton, and the education at her school was so good that the white folks in Chatham, the middle class folks, sent their kids out to be educated by her. That's how sterling that her education was, or what she taught. And don't forget, in the 1800s, if you were a woman, you were not going to get published, or not under your female name. And
Right.
one of my favorite songwriters is a woman named Fanny Crosby. She wrote 8,000 hymns, but she couldn't publish in her own name, so she had to publish by pseudonyms. And I can name some of her songs, and your folks who go to church would know these songs. They're just very simple songs, but that's just the way it was back then.
Well, that's something I'm glad that you you put that name out to me and said, Dan, you'll enjoy doing some research here because we didn't touch on it much on the first, I'll
Hmm.
call it Dan Kobylka Part One, that Chatham has such a rich culture or a rich history in that period. I'm not speaking as eloquently as I'd like to,
Hmm.
but it is becoming a settlement for African Americans in the late 19th century.
Yeah. And another thing about Chatham, this isn't one of our more sterling moments. If you're here, you'll notice there's a lot of Japanese names. And there's a reason for that, is because we had an internment camp just south of Chatham.
Hmm.
And they brought the Japanese who moved in from the coast. They had a little camp outside Chatham. I didn't know that till a few years ago myself. So, but as a nation,
Well,
we kind of said, we shouldn't have done that as a nation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've just through our connection, I definitely want to visit the area.
Hmm.
And I can't put a date on it, but um, I know there will be a time where you and I can connect and
Sure.
slap hands and break bread and go, and you could show me around town.
Well, you put Jack Miner's bird sanctuary on your list of things to do. It's world famous. It's right around Leamington, Ontario. And for some reason, the birds know where to fly, and it's a sanctuary. So sometimes in the fall, that you can't see the ground for the geese. And it's a very, very famous bird sanctuary and like an animal place.
Well, Dan, let's talk a little bit about Christmas and the spirit of Christmas. What are some
Sure.
things that you like to do around this time of year? Are you out there stringing the lights and doing the yard stuff, or what is your? I,
Okay,
I see
I
my.
live in an apartment. I live in an apartment, so stringing the
Oh,
lights.
okay.
The one thing I do the Salvation Army kettle,
Hmm.
and I love it. And they said, Dan, they found your perfect jobs. You hand out candy to people and you talk to them. And I said, and
Yep.
and, and it just to me and for your listeners, uh, you could be on the other side of that kettle very quickly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everybody has a story. And when I was coaching the kids in the Challenger baseball, there's a couple of young 12, 13-year-old boys on their bikes outside the fence making fun of them. And I went over and I said, boys, you like those bikes? They said, yeah. And I said, one slip on the bike and you're on the other side of the fence. That's all it would take.
Yeah.
Then I invited them out onto the field to meet the players. But people have to know uh, Southern Ontario in Canada is not unlike the United States, and we are having a real crisis with homelessness right now. And that's kind of where my heart is. And when people will question whether they should be homeless or whatever, I say, buy them a coffee, hear their story, because everybody has a story, you know. And
Yeah.
we actually have people who have jobs that are living on the streets, and that's a sad statement. But I will say
Hmm.
our county is very good about helping out the homeless and getting them on the right track. We can give them food, but we can't make an apartment out of nowhere. So that's the first step. So,
Right.
but we're just like any other country in terms of the homelessness issues, and it saddens me, but we do what we can.
Yeah. I purposefully selected a downtown church for our family
Hmm.
to begin attending January of this year. So almost a full calendar year. I didn't grow up going to church.
Hmm.
I didn't attend church or seek out a church in my bachelor years. And when our family was complete, we went a couple times before Vivian was born, but uh, it was something that I wanted to get us involved in, but it had to be
Hmm.
the right place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and so our church, as soon as we open the doors, and every few Sundays, I volunteer with the guest services,
Sure.
but there's anywhere from um, 8, 10, or 15 or so of the area homeless that will come in, grab some coffee,
Mhm.
A good many of them will grab the coffee and go on their way, and that's no big deal. And,
No,
a few
not
of
at all.
them will stay for the service. But I like that our service, when you walk in, you've got the people who are dressed well, they
Hmm.
smell nice, they look nice, and
Hmm.
then you got this guy over here that has been wearing the same pair of clothes for a couple weeks or longer, and um, that's important to me. I don't want to go to a church where it's just all people that are uh, smiling and glittering
Yeah,
and pulling up in similar SUVs. I don't need that. I need to be a little closer to the people. So
sure.
I like that you mentioned that. People people just need to see that the folks who are struggling don't have a place to live, like you said, maybe even working and getting paid every week or two and still don't have a place to live. You
Right.
need to lay eyes on these people.
Hmm.
You need to get out of your area sometimes and just like I said,
Um,
be aware that they're there and
yeah,
help. Just it is a huge problem all over the place, but there's
yeah.
always little ways that you can help, and sometimes that may just be smiling at them, putting your hand on a shoulder. I try to do that as we're leaving. Just I'll put my
Hmm.
hand on a guy's shoulder,
Sure.
just acknowledging him. Some of
Yeah.
these people don't get acknowledged. They don't get. Um, well, I could go on, but I
Well,
appreciate you bringing that up.
and there's a story about a young fellow who came into a church, and he was dirty and smelly, and hair was a mess. And he sat in the front, and he really enjoyed the service. And on the way out, one of the elders grabbed him, and the elders got the black suit, the red tie, the white shirt. And he says, "Son, I want you to go home and pray to God as to what's the appropriate wear for this church." Kid goes home, comes back a week dirtier, a week smellier, hair's a bit worse. And as he's leaving, the elder says to him, "Did you do what I asked you to do? Did you go home and pray to God as what's appropriate attire for this church?" And the young fellow says, "I did, but God said he wouldn't know because he's never been here."
Mm.
And that's struck me, you know. And I like to have a church with different cultures as well, because Christianity fits into different cultures. And to go to a church where everybody's the same. And as we're talking about the baseball program, you have to be used to being around people that aren't just like you. That's really important. And some people aren't. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I went back and listened to our episode. I usually don't
Mm-hmm.
listen to the old ones once I've recorded them,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I wanted to brush up on ours. And I remember you saying that with your volunteers. You said, "Hey, listen, I appreciate you wanting to get involved in the program here.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you're okay with working hand to hand with someone who's not didn't grow up like you did
Yeah. Yeah.
or has challenges that you don't face."
Yeah. I was thinking when you emailed me, some of the traditions we used to have. I'm wondering if you had the same ones growing up. So our living room was full of Christmas cards, hundreds, and people just don't do that anymore. Now maybe you do, but I think back to those hundreds of cards, and it reminds you of how many friends you have, which
Yeah,
is really nice. And we always got the real Christmas tree. And you may in Alabama or wherever you were, you may not have twigged onto this little tradition, but everybody threw their trees out. We would take them in the park and make forts, and then we could have snowball fights. So it's one of our little Christmas traditions.
yeah. We
And I was,
oh, go ahead.
I was fortunate to grow up in a very close knit neighborhood, and that really helps. And whenever I meet my friends from back then, we just reminisce about how great it was growing up in that little street, the different goofy things we did. So,
We moved around a lot when I was young, up until third grade. And so I remember being like, I'd be in second grade and I would miss my friends from first grade. We moved
oh yeah,
from
oh yeah,
Chicago to Northern Virginia to Florence, Alabama. That was a culture
mm-hmm.
shock.
Yeah,
Um, then to Birmingham. And yeah, and then in Birmingham, it was nice, but we didn't have the kids down the street. It was
Oh,
our house was a little more isolated as far, or there just weren't as many kids our age in the neighborhood. But I do remember um, my mother had, she always had Christmas music playing.
mhm.
And there's this cassette tape that still survives. And that's, so I've got it now. And it's about 40 years old. And it's uh, country music artist
Okay,
uh, the- performing some of the classic songs. Hark the Herald Angels Sing, Holy Night,
yeah,
Oh Holy Night, and Silent Night, Winter Wonderland. So you've got Chet Atkins, Willie Nelson,
sure.
um, um, Tammy Wynette. It so I've played it a few times. I don't think that my kids are really, they're not grabbing onto it.
Oh,
I
yeah.
put it on last night and Warren said, "Hey, can we watch my cartoons now?" But yeah, there's always candles lit,
Yeah.
the music playing, the live tree. We don't have a live tree this year, but man, we'd go out and my dad would take us to a Christmas tree farm. We'd cut one down and had that whole experience with the hot chocolate
Oh, yeah.
and the
Yeah.
wagon ride.
Yeah. The live Christmas tree place in our area, during the summer, it's a nudist colony. So, where'd you get your tree? Oh, we went to the nudist colony. I said, I hope they weren't closed when you got out there in December. I said, yeah. And my father was a first class stationary engineer, but his singular talent was picking up the worst tree on the lot. So we would spend hours after we got home trying to hide all the bare spots. But that was a bit of our tradition as well. And this is not culturally, your listeners may not kind of twig onto this, but it's kind of a growing up thing for us. If I got all my friends from the neighborhood together and I said cars, they'd all run to the side of the road because we played road hockey. That was the big thing. And a car comes around, you say cars, and everybody gets off, and that was a big deal for us. And if I said cars to my friends, they just jumped to the side of the road because that was part of our Christmas day growing up, was playing road hockey.
And do you have any of those kids from way back that you still keep in touch with or exchange cards?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
Where I grew up, it was like a circle, and maybe a third of a mile around. And I think at one time we may have had 100 kids on that street. And we had our own school. And the little street was called Oriole Parkway. And we have a saying, wherever we go in the world, we're going to meet somebody with a connection to Oriole Parkway. And when my ex and I were on our honeymoon in PEI, we signed in a guest book, and all of a sudden we hear, "Who is from Oriole Parkway?" And it was from some of my neighbors from when I was growing up. So I said, "Hun, wherever we go in the world, we're going to meet somebody with an Oriole Parkway connection." And we had our own school, a little four-room schoolhouse.
Dan, as always, I just enjoy these conversations. I know so this one is 2 months removed from the last one.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to have to be a part three, a part four.
Sure.
We're just going to have a series of Dan Kobylka episodes until someone says, "Yeah, you guys got to cut it out." But I hope everyone is enjoying our newly formed friendship, excuse me. Uh, you're the first guest north of the border,
Mm-hmm.
really first international guest. I've got an Australian guest coming up in
Okay.
a week or two. I've had a musician from the UK,
All
and
right.
so that's really important for me to bring people in touch with folks that are well out of their backyard.
Yeah.
That's cool for me. We've had several female guests this month. Planning to have a few more. So this is a big net.
And it's easy to forget when you and I are talking right now that the whole world gets to hear it. I've
Right.
done I've done radio interviews. I got to remind myself, watch the language because everybody can hear you. And it's easy to forget when you're in a small studio.
Yeah.
You know, there's
I've got some. Uh,
go ahead.
no, I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say I do have some listeners from different parts of the world, and
Okay.
that really brings me special joy to um, present a show for someone where they get to hear two guys talking or me talking
Mhm.
to, like I said, one of our female guests, and you just get to hear a conversation that you don't maybe get to hear at your local coffee shop, and not that you should
Yeah.
be eavesdropping, uh, but yeah, hopefully that's
Uh,
the value.
Sometimes when with my friend in I got to explain Tim Hortons to you. That's our coffee chain up here. It's like our version of Krispy Kreme. And Tim Horton played hockey for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And he started this donut franchise. And there's like Chatham's 45,000 people. There's 11 Tim Hortons franchises in Chatham. Like we tell them, it's like a virus, the Tim Hortons virus. Once it gets in there, and if you ever meet anybody from Canada again, just tell them you like the Tim Hortons coffee. And no, I went to a Krispy Kreme with my friend in Atlanta, and my first thought was, "Where's the tables?" Because Tim Hortons is famous because they have the tables, and Tim Horton realized people wanted to sit down and gab over their coffee, and that's why it
Yep.
was success. That's why it was success. We think of it as like the Chatham's Facebook. That's where you get all the gossip.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
Dan, anything else you want to add? I forgot to ask, what are you in the playoffs in your fantasy football league? Have
oh yeah, I
they
got
already?
second in playing in my keeper league. I'm in. I finished second, so I'm playing in the third place team this week. So we'll see how it goes. Because it's a keeper league, I may keep somebody who maybe is going to play this year, that's going to contribute
Mhm.
next year. So, and just getting back to the fantasy football for a second, I have what my friends and I call the Le'Veon Bell rule. Never pick a running back who held out the year before, because they always have trouble. And the woods are full. I'm thinking like Austin Eckler this year, or Dalvin Cook went from an all-star to backup in New York.
Yeah.
So if we have somebody like, I traded away Jonathan Taylor this year because I knew he was going to have a lot of injuries because he held out. So there's little things that, the axioms, if you will, that I've kind of picked up over the years.
What do you think of the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh? I know Roethlisberger is understandably not very happy about what's
Yeah.
been going on since he stepped away. But I think they're using Mason,
Rudolph.
is it Mason Rudolph?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that kid's got some promise.
Well, anytime you have to rely on Mitch Trubisky, that's going to be a problem. In fact, I don't even heard of the guy who's starting for the Chargers tonight. And I have a friend who I talk football with, and we both agree there's been some really awful football this year. And if it
Yeah.
wasn't for fantasy football, I would not be watching Las Vegas or a team like that, because I have a player. But there's been some real, and a lot of it is because of my opinion is they're using a lot of backup quarterbacks,
Yeah, I've
and
heard it's
guys
I've
getting hurt, and it really has affected. It
yeah.
really has affected. I mean, I had Justin Jefferson in my league. Well, as soon as Kirk Cousins got hurt, the value was going to go down. But there are games I watched just because my players in it. They're just, to me, they're unwatchable. So,
Right.
and I want to put out
Um,
a request for Yahoo, if that's okay.
oh yeah.
Okay, Yahoo Fantasy Football gods or managers. You got to give
And that's
every
where we
team,
play on Yahoo.
okay, and you'll identify with this. Every team needs to have 4 NA positions, and anybody who is on a bye week gets an NA designation, so you can keep them on your team. And I've been in a situation where I basically forfeited a game because I didn't want to drop one of my better players, and we call that the strategic loss.
Sure.
And that's just experience. You learn those things.
I'm
My
looking at
way,
some of the
okay, go ahead.
no, I was looking at some of the offensive stats leaders right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, you look at some of the names just at quarterback, where hard to believe that Brady's gone. Breeze.
Yeah.
Well, Manning's been a few years.
Yeah.
Philip Rivers, Matt Ryan,
Mm-hmm.
all these guys. It was kind of nice. I think it was going back to Flacco when he started against the Rams. He had Flacco opposite Matt Stafford. And
Yes.
I think those guys were separated by a year as far as their draft year, 08 and
Mm-hmm.
09. And to see both of them still starting
Yeah.
in the NFL. I think it's good to have at least a couple of the old dogs still left
Oh,
and playing well, not just out there making a mess of themselves. So
yeah.
it's good for the
The idea
league.
is what do you call it? Consistent production you can count on this year. And one player who's killing me is Tony Pollard, because some
Hmm.
games they just don't give him the ball, and he's not been a consistent producer of fantasy points. Because like I said, you got to count on the guy who's going to be consistent week in and week out.
Do you have you prepared to make a Super Bowl prediction as far as
This is for my
matchups?
nephew. This is my nephew. I think it's going to be San Francisco. They're just solid. They're
Yeah.
just solid. And Brock Purdy is not going to say, "Get on my back, boys. I'm going to carry you," but he gets the ball to the people who can make the plays, and he knows
It would
his
be
role.
fun to see, if we saw a Ravens 49ers rematch.
Yeah.
Uh, this would be, yeah, it was the 2013 Super Bowl. It's always the 20, like that would have been the 2012 versions of those teams. So it's not quite a little bit more than 10 years later. That would be really cool.
Well, I was
Um,
around when the Cleveland Browns became the Baltimore Ravens, and the hand wringing, like that team was very important to Cleveland. And to this day,
oh,
this
yeah,
Art Modell
it may have been Indianapolis or Baltimore moved to Indianapolis and then they were without a, Baltimore
team.
was without a team for a while.
Yeah.
Um, I think, and I keep saying this, I think that Cleveland with their defense, um, I'm not ready to go out and say that they will reach the AFC title game,
Mm-hmm.
but I will not be shocked if Cleveland gets to the AFC championship game. Um, it's gonna be fun to watch when you've got
They'll be
the
playing
number one
Baltimore.
overall.
Yeah, they'll be playing
Yeah,
Baltimore. I'm
they have
sure
to
of
go
that.
through. Yeah, you
It's
got to go
it's
through
like
the Ravens.
with the Lions, if you got to go through the Silverdome or the Ford Field for all your games, the Lions have a chance. But they don't do well
Yeah,
outdoors. They do not do well against running quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson just killed them. Well, you probably watched that game,
yeah, yeah.
and they were
What
just helpless against him. And they played Justin Fields, and he really, had an impact there too.
what about? Do you have a prediction on Bill Belichick? Is he going to retire after this year? Do you see him? Could you
Yeah,
picture
I
him on
think
the sideline
I
with
think he's
another
going to
team?
retire. He's going to retire. He doesn't need this. You know.
Yeah,
What I noticed is a lot of the coaches that are away from his staff do not do well with their new teams because they try to
yeah,
institute the Belichick system, and they're not Bill Belichick. I mean, Matt Patricia just destroyed the Lions. I mean, it was
yeah.
bad. It was like in the Chargers game, the team just quit on him. They want to get rid of him, and that's unfortunate.
Well, Dan, it has been a pleasure, and I truly mean that. Sometimes I say this a lot on all the episodes. It's been so great talking to you. I so enjoy this. I've so been looking forward to this um, since we reconnected again,
Thank you.
and can't wait to yeah, if we stay on track here, we'll do another episode in say March.
Sure. Um,
Um, we
just
talk a
one
little.
final thing for your
Mhm.
viewers, and this really struck me the other day. God only made one race, the human race, and
Love it.
the anti-Semitism and the vitriol towards the Palestinians really saddens me. It does.
Yeah,
And someone told me that if you put 100 black ants in a jar with 100 red ants, they will not fight each other. But if you shake the jar, they'll fight each other. So maybe we should focus on the one who's shaking the jar.
yeah,
And that's just something that's really been on my heart lately. There's only one race, the human race. And if you want to find differences, you will.
yeah. I see my small children, especially my 2-year-old in his preschool class, and there's black kids and white kids, and you know that their parents take them to different
Mhm.
churches, and some may be Christians, some may be Jews. Little kids, and whether they're 2 or 8, they don't argue about this stuff. They
Nope.
don't make divisions over this stuff. They play.
Yeah.
They have fun. They realize, okay, I get along with this guy better, this girl
Yeah.
better. But children are not born to hate.
No.
So hopefully we'll make some progress there.
Oh,
I'm so glad
I
you said that.
well, and it's true. And I did a message once, a Christmas message about how the shepherds were actually children. And why would God announce the birth of his son to children? And I realized it's because the adults would have screwed it up. So he had to tell
Yeah,
the children because they wouldn't have messed it up. And there's a lot of truth to that.
that's right.
And you will see and I saw you got baptized, by the way, congratulations. But as
Thanks,
you
Dan.
continue in your walk in your faith, you are going to see there's divisions in the church too.
Oh yeah, it doesn't stop. Doesn't
No.
stop there.
And by the way, those who complain all their lives in their church, when they get to the nursing home, they don't stop. I mean, that's just them.
Yeah. All right. Well, what an episode. Can't wait for the next one. I hope you
All
guys
right.
will be eager for the next conversation too. Remember, there's really no need. I do the remember thing at the end, but you've said it all, Dan. Um, the only thing I could say is remember, if you're sitting here, it's Christmas Eve and you don't have anybody to hold on to, you don't have a lot of presents under the tree, you don't have much money in your wallet, you can still make a difference with somebody if you get out around your community. Just flash a smile, put your hand on the shoulder of somebody as you're going to get a cup of coffee or something. It really will make you feel better. So focus on the small stuff. Don't think that you're not important or you don't matter or someone might not benefit from crossing paths with you. So thank you, Dan. Thanks
And
so much. And go ahead. And I'll let you have the
I just want
last
to say
word.
this. Remember, I said earlier, everybody has a story. Everybody has a story. And someone said, why can't they pull themselves up by the bootstraps? And I said, because they have no boots. You know. Anyway, you're going to close up.
All right. Well, and remember, make it work.
Yep.
Always remember, make it work. Okay, Dan. We'll plan to talk to you again
Yeah.
in the
Just let
new
me know when.
year.
All
Okay,
right.
everyone.
All right.
Happy
God bless everybody.
holidays and best to everyone in 2024. Thanks for listening to the Dan Time Podcast. Take care, Dan.
All right. God bless. All right. Bye bye.